What's up, everybody? It's Spencer Alessi, and this is the Esports Narrative. I appreciate you coming on the show and talking to us. This is going to be episode 16, and I am here with Pierce, who is the Smash 4 shoutcaster and coach for TSM Zero, who plays professional Smash Brothers, rather. And Pierce, welcome to the show. And
thanks for having
me. Appreciate you. Yeah, thanks for coming on. And before we get started, I'd like to just hear kind of how you got started in esports and how you came to love fighting games and be coaching TSM Zero.
How did I get started in esports? Well, back when I started, it wasn't called esports. You know, back when I started, I was a 16-year-old kid. I guess that's when I started competing, and that was 10 years ago. I'm 26 now. Yeah, so I guess I've been around for a long time. You know, before League of Legends was a game, back when StarCraft was the hottest title out, I used to compete in Smash Bros. Because I love video games since I was a very young child. I've been jumping on Goombas since I was 4 years old. And, you know, I'm a very competitive person. I used to think, oh, I'm the best, I'm hot stuff. And then I found out that there were tournaments for this. So I was like, oh, let me go check that out. And then I quickly found out that I was not actually hot stuff. But of course, this just sparked a motivation for me to get good, as we say. So I started competing in tournaments when I was around 16 years old with Super Smash Bros. Melee. Also, back in the day, I used to compete in Yu-Gi-Oh! So this made up my competitive portfolio. And then from there, you know, when Super Smash Bros. Brawl came out in 2008, I transitioned over to that title where I rose to be a very strong player, top 50 in the world. And that's where I met Zero. So that's how we got connected. Because although he was a bit newer to the scene, having obviously been born in Chile, he's a Chilean player. He moved over to the States. We flew under the same organization back in the day, Clash Tournaments. And we met there. We became very close. We would talk a lot about different things, real life, the game, et cetera, et cetera. And I kind of look at him like my younger brother. He's very precious to me. So we established a close connection. I retired from the Smash scene. I retired from competition in 2012 to focus more on just, as you mentioned, shoutcasting tournaments because esports started to bubble up and become a thing. Obviously, StarCraft did plenty for pushing the industry forward, and then League of Legends doubled down on that and really came up with a formula that could work for mainstream and push us to the next level. So thanks to those titles and several others along the way, thanks to organizations like MLG, who I've had the honor of working with in the past, you see the shapings of what has now become modern esports today back then. And with this happening, I really wanted to get into shoutcasting. I love teaching. I love spreading information. You know, back in the days of when I used to compete in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, I was renowned as the most knowledgeable player in the world. And I used to always love teaching different people things, and I loved shoutcasting because it was a way that I could express tons of information and get out a lot of high-level information to a large audience at once. So I really wanted to start focusing on that a little bit more. It was even more important to me than competing. And when I decided that becoming the best in the world was no longer really my passion as much as just spreading knowledge and love of the game, that's when I started focusing more on casting. Fast forward to 2014, other elements of my life started to brighten up. I started getting pretty serious with my now ex-girlfriend. And, you know, I got a promotion at work. Nice. A bunch of things happened. So it meant less time for focusing on Smash. And I felt that Smash was in a good spot. It was in good hands. Everybody, all the positions that I needed to make sure were filled were actually taken care of by competent people. We have very good tournament organizers in our scene, very talented casters in our scene, and just basically a very great, diverse pool of talent and of community leaders in the Smash community. So I wanted to, it was time for me, I felt, to take a step away. So in late 2014, I kind of hung up my microphone and took a step away from the Smash scene, just basically observing only as a spectator, every once in a while popping in a local event, but mostly kind of vacated from the game right around the same time that Smash 4 came out. So I was kind of absent from the scene for quite a while, but it was toward the end of 2016 in December. it was some time after I had broke up with, again, my now ex-girlfriend, and I started going to more locals, et cetera, and I said, you know what, I think it's time for me to hop back in this. I have more time now in my life, once now that I'm single again, and just observing everything that's going on. The patches they made to the game made me like Smash 4 more than I liked it on release, from both a spectator and a game balance perspective. So it was a game that I really started feeling like I could get behind. I felt that the metagame was very diverse, but also fulfilling, as opposed to when the game first came out. I felt like a lot of characters didn't really have, the kick to them that I really felt made a good game. I thought the mechanics were a little poor, but they made a bunch of changes to make the game a lot better, in my opinion. And I felt that there was a niche in commentary and in information sharing that just wasn't happening. With the esportsification of the industry as a whole, what ended up happening was a lot of players and a lot of organizations now wanted to monetize things, which is all good and well. I have nothing against that. But as a result, collaboration stopped happening because it was not profitable for top minds to come together and release content for the sake of the community, because if you're collaborating on a project, now you have the problem, okay, well, where's this information going to get published, and who's going to be the one that profits off of it?
Right.
So because of this, it's now a lot more incentivized for everybody to do their own individual thing. But of course, this is not going to produce the same type of quality as when you have all the best and the brightest working together towards a common goal. So when I was involved in the scene, esports wasn't yet so prevalent in Smash that this was really an issue. So you would have everybody work together. Everybody would chip in their own opinions and come together and work on a project. And we were all unified on Smashboards. Over time, Smashboards started to die out more and more with the rise of social media. Facebook became very popular. Twitter became very popular. So if you wanted a top player's opinion on something, or if you wanted to look into a group of people's opinion on something, you would find the Facebook group, or you would follow your player on Twitter and get the information that most catered to you. You would just be invested in the Facebook group for your region, for instance. And once everything started going away off into the social media groups, what ended up happening was you no longer set Smashboards as your homepage. You have Facebook as your homepage because you could get your Smash news there and everything else in your life also there. So there was no need to now specialize or have a location where all the information specialized was gathered. And so, of course, Smashboard still exists, and, Smash Reddit still exists, et cetera, but right. It's not nearly as popular as it was back in the day. I mean, the traffic is still great, but top players don't frequent it. Back in the day, when I was on Smashboards, everybody was on Smashboards. I would go online, and I would just see all the names I knew of everybody who was relevant in the community because we were all there. Nowadays, almost none of the most relevant people go there, so you still do have tons of excellent content creators and tons of awesome contributors who go there and they provide content and they provide stats and data, et cetera, et cetera. So it's still a great resource for new players to check it out. But it's not what it once was, where it had the legacy of this is where the best and the brightest all gather and dump everything. So it's just not the same as it once was. And now the collaboration aspect isn't there anymore. Coming back to the scene and seeing how the industry changed the way that information was distributed, it kind of sparked me to get back out there, because once it was changed how the information was distributed, the amount of information being distributed dropped drastically. You didn't have the same amount of research going into the game because either it was not profitable to provide that kind of research anymore, right? Your top players, are they going to benefit more from providing boring analysis, which not a lot of people are going to click on, or do they get more out of focusing on creating highlights that, are going to get tons of views? Obviously, it's going to be the latter. So people were more top players in the best and brightest minds were more concerned about what is the hypest, most profitable thing I can do. And I don't blame them for that. I don't hold this against any player. Obviously, you have to do what makes the buck, because if you want to take this seriously, you need to make sure you're getting paid. Otherwise, you won't be able to continue doing it at all. But again, with the industry shift, it really changed the way that things came out. And so I wanted to hop back into the industry because I felt like there's a niche there to teach. And it's not really getting fulfilled as well as it used to be back in my day. So I'm going to hop back in and try and re-inject that back into the scene. As it turns out, when I made the announcement on Twitter in 2016 December that I was going to come back to the Smash scene, right away, Zero, who I mentioned I've been very good friends with for a long time, he came into my inbox and he was like, saw you're coming back to the scene, want you to be my coach. And I was like, well, that's not really what I had in mind, but you know what? Screw it. We've worked together plenty in the past. You're a really good friend of mine. Let's work on it. So,
nice.
You know, along with the help of Team Solo Mid, who I'm very grateful to, and then, of course, Zero himself, I've been basically touring the Smash Pro League and just helping him alongside in all these major tournaments and getting to check out all the different events that have been going on in the U.S. this year. And it's been a great time. It's really, really good to be back. I'm now starting to add more commentary into my roster, so I've been actually applying to cast a few tournaments. My legacy doesn't exactly hold up since the other casters have far and away developed much more notable branding than mine currently exists, having been away from the scene at the boom of Smash 4. And so that's okay. I mean, some gigs I get passed on, some I don't, but I will be casting at a couple of tournaments coming up. Really excited to be heading to MVG's event next month.
Awesome.
I believe it's in the Orlando area. I have to double check, but that's going to be fun. So you can check me out at that event and then a couple of others that are coming up. But just for like this upcoming weekend, I'll be in Boston for Shine, although I won't be casting at that event. So, you know, I got a couple of things in the calendar. There's a bunch more tournaments to come out. And it's just been a great time working together with Zero, seeing the development of Smash and Esports. And while I'm obviously doing my thing with Zero, coaching him and trying to help him rack up as many W's as possible, looking out for the scene and figuring out ways that I can help shift the industry behind the scenes as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned coaching TSM Zero. What do you think makes a good coach? Like, what are some things that you think you bring to the table that make you a good coach and make him a successful Smash player?
Okay. So when I coach, there are a couple of key things I focus on. One is, I think far and away the most important part of my job is to make sure that my players' mentality is always in the right spot, which just comes down to preparation. Preparation is the biggest part of what I do. A lot of people think that coaching is basically just what they see on the screen, which was mid-set coaching, which is now banned in Smash 4 as of very recently. Mm-hmm. And that's completely okay by me. As I mentioned in a short Twitter video blurb, that's only 5 to 10% of what I do, if even that much. If I was just impactful in that 30-second timeout in each set, and that was all I got to do, it would be a waste of everybody's time and resources to even have me at all. And Zero could just do what every other top player was doing and just call upon another top player in that timeout. What I do is make sure we're prepared for the events. So I get to focus on constantly studying the metagame and figuring out solutions to situations which have not yet been optimized. And furthermore, figuring out what our opponents are doing and how the metagame is developing so we can develop strategies to overcome them so that basically we go into a match with the edge. If we know what our opponents are going to do and we come up with solutions for that before we fight them as opposed to trying to do it on the fly, we're a lot more prepared. And it's going to result in a lot more consistency and a lot more victories that way. The key is to always push forward so that we have strategies that result in consistent victories. So helping to develop those kinds of strategies is very useful. And making sure my player's mentality is in the best spot possible is very useful. I need to make sure that Zero feels comfortable in what he's doing. If he doesn't feel comfortable, that's because something is giving him trouble or he doesn't know the solution to a given situation. So I help to make sure that we develop solutions to things that are giving him trouble or that we're unsure what to do. We look into it, we research, we play test, we look what other players are doing, and we watch videos of previous footage, how we're getting hit or why we're not being able to clutch out certain situations, and we figure out what do we do in our gameplay to make sure that we can overcome these situations and we don't run into these problems. Or if it's a problem that's unsolvable, how do we mitigate it? How do we make up for it in a different area so that the ratio of us losing in situation X arises far less often than us winning in situation Y, and how can we create situation Y to happen more often so we don't have to deal with situation X? These kinds of things. And, just making sure that he feels confident going into each match. We have a plan to follow, and this way we're not winging the matches, We don't have to play on instinct and reaction when we can just go in and execute.
Awesome. Now, what percentage of pro players do you think have a coach?
right now, percentage of pro players, if we define a pro player as a sponsor player, which is roughly 30 players or so, I don't know for sure, I would have to look at numbers. Out of 30 players, have a coach as in a dedicated person in that role, which I'm going to say is 3 or 4, maybe a little bit more. Let's even go as high as 5 or 6. Because I know there's a couple of other coaches. MVG has Scat on the organization. He coaches most of the MVG players. I know that Panda Global does field a coach whose name I forget. I apologize. I know that DeBuzz has a coach, Coach Payne, so that's another one right there. So that's obviously myself, Coaching Zero, so that's 4. Those are the ones that come to mind immediately. I know that there's a guy out there named Coach Zeke. I'm not sure who he coaches and in what capacity, and if it's a pro player or not. But his name definitely gets thrown around a lot, so we'll call that 5, and that's 5 off the top of my head. There's probably, at least 1 or 2 others that maybe I'm either not aware of or are just out there and I've forgotten. Yeah. So let's say it's like 6. Let's say there's probably about 30 pro players, like people who legitimately make a salary off of playing Smash Bros, are sponsored by an organization enough that it makes up the majority of their living, if not all of it. So 6 out of 30 is roughly 1/5, or it is actually exactly 1/5. So we'll call it about 20% of pro players that have a coach.
Yeah. Now, you talked about how the fighting game and esports in general, there's been this notion of esportsifying. What if you had to describe esports to somebody in a couple sentences? How would you describe esports?
Well, I do that every day in my regular life because I go home and people always ask me, like, what are you always doing traveling every 2 weeks? And I tell them, I'm the personal coach for an esports athlete. And so obviously the question I always get is, well, what is esports and what's an esports athlete? And they're confused. So I say esports is basically the entertainment medium where competitive video games are played and spectated. That's quite simply the easiest way to explain it, and also probably the most accurate in my opinion. So yeah. That's what esports is. Basically, it's when people play video games, often for a living, and they compete in it in either a league or a tournament series or structure. And they try and beat all the other players while a bunch of people watch.
Now, what's been your worst moment so far in this whole journey of esports or fighting games for you?
There's 2 of them. I don't know which one takes the cake. It's really hard because, hindsight is 20/20, but I'll throw them both at you. The first one was during Civil War. I mean, that was so hard. It was a big tournament. Zero was one of he was on a hot win streak. We really wanted to do well. It was the biggest tournament of the year up to this point. It was by far the most hype event. And Zero was one of the featured players. It was basically a tournament which featured the rivalry between him and Cloud9's ally. And we just completely scrubbed out at that tournament, securing Zero's worst placing of his entire competitive career at, I think, 49th, something awful. And that was just a super low of lows. We really, really wanted to perform well at this tournament. I mean, there was a huge pot bonus, so we missed out on the money. We missed out on the prestige. We missed out on a lot of matches that could have been played up. Everybody was watching and was expecting us to do well because of, the nature of how big the event was, and just our losses weren't even other top players or people notable. I mean, our losses were to, 2 pretty good players that I have a lot of respect for. That would be Xac, Matt the Libertor, originally hailing from PA and now lives in California, and it was Lutai, who's a Zero Suit Samus main. I don't remember from where. And Xac's playing Fox. And, both of these losses were people that we would be wildly expected to beat. I mean, these were big upsets, not even PGR ranked players. So actually, XX might be somewhere on the lower end of PGR. I have to double check, but definitely not people that you would expect to take sets off Zero. Definitely not, top 10 or top 20 players. So, this was a really devastating loss for us. We were pretty much just depressed for the rest of the event. And then, kind of recently also, at EVO was a really, really devastating trip for us because once again, it was the prestige of the tournament that it really gets to us. There's so much on the line. And EVO was even more hurtful because by the time EVO had run around, I would now say I'm a lot more experienced in what I do and my role as a coach and a lot better at it because having just jumped back into Smash, I had to reacclimate myself with Smash 4. Obviously, most of my experience prior was with Brawl, and although I had followed the game in my retired state, obviously I still watch matches throughout the entire time. Really getting to know the game is a whole different story. So by the time Evo rolled around, I already know the game extremely well. I had watched by now thousands and thousands of matches and spent hours and hours poring over the game and coming up with theory and testing stuff and discussions with other players and Zero himself and things like this. So by now I know the game fairly well. And I put a ton of preparation into Evo, like I prepared for no event ever before it, because Evo was so important to us. We knew that Disney, that the matches were going to be displayed on Disney, and that there was going to be the most entrants ever for a tournament, and the stakes were going to be super high. The pot is large. It wasn't even inflated by a bonus. It was just the fact that there were so many entrants just made the pot really large, and the stage was there, the media was there, everybody's there, and the expectation's all on us to perform well. We're the favorite to win the tournament, and we need to secure that. And we prepared so hard for the event, and to be honest, the preparation really showed off. I mean, going into top 8 of the event, every match before, we dropped less stocks than sets played. So it was quite a dominant performance going into the top 8. And then even our first round in top 8, we dismissed Tweak very, very easily. Larry was quite a close match, but Zero was able to clutch it out. And so we were in winner side grand finals. To lose 2 sets in a row to Salem, who is definitely somebody we respect tremendously and had respected even going into that set. But just to lose 2 sets in a row on the big stage like that, coming into that game 10 and not being able to clutch it out, I mean, that was absolutely devastating. I like to tell the story of how, I'm standing right up against the stage at the Mandalay Bay Arena in Las Vegas. And, I'm screaming at every moment, every time Zero lands a hit, because I'm just so excited for the match, and I really want to see him win so bad. And, because I'm generating so much noise and attention, the media is swarming. Obviously, they're around the stage already, and they start swarming around me, and they're taking pictures and recordings and, seeing everything that's going on, watching me intensely because, I'm all decked out in my TSM garb, and, Zero's right there on the stage. I'm his coach, and I'm cheering like crazy. And so, you've got photographers snapping pictures, journalists swarming around. And that final moment when Salem lands that last up B and it hits him and he dies off the top at 30, and the crowd erupts and everybody feels it's over, and I'm just there shell shocked, like I can't believe this happened. All this work and effort we put in, and it just gets washed away right here. We have to go home with the sour taste of second place in our mouth. And it just sunk in like we lost. And I know everybody's congratulating me on second place, and I'm just like, second place is trash. Like, it's worthless.
You're a competitor. You want to win. I hear you.
Exactly. And it was just it's crazy because, like, the feeling of just all the reporters instantly losing interest in me. Nobody cares about who I am anymore. Nobody remembers second place. And that's a common saying that you hear. Nobody remembers second place. But to be in that second place position and just have all the lights and cameras turn off of you, people walking past you to get the interview with the guy behind you, who's now all of a sudden the most interesting guy in the room as you become nobody on the spot within a span of 5 seconds, that was devastating.
Yep. The best player no one knows about, or, the best team no one knows about, right?
Right.
So what did you take away from that, or what did you learn from that experience?
Oh, what did I learn from that experience? It sucks to lose. I mean, that's something I already knew. What did I learn from that experience? Ugh. That's the worst part. There's almost like nothing to take away from that, because how do we lose? We just didn't perform well in the final match of the tournament. That's it. What do we take away from that? Well, we need to prepare more for Bayonetta, I guess. There's almost nothing that we could take away from it. The only way to rectify the situation, to redeem ourselves, is to win the next one. And to follow up on that, we placed 9th at DreamHack. We were just on a downward spiral. It was awful. And we hadn't won a tournament since. We then came second at SmashCon. And before that, we came second. So we came second at DreamHack, second at SmashCon. I think Zero got another second place tournament somewhere else in there. He's winning his locals, but that doesn't count for anything. So, not to say it doesn't count for anything. Ned is a very good player, and Tyroy that play at his locals. But, on the big scale, it doesn't count. It doesn't count towards rankings, which is what we're trying to accomplish here, being ranked 1 on the Panda Global rankings for, yet another season. So with that, he was able to score first place at SoCal Regional Saga, hosted by 2GG in Santa Ana, California this past weekend. that was an extremely big victory for us. Another S tier event that we were finally, our first S tier event win of the season, which is tragic for me to say. And we are very grateful for that victory. And I'm very, very proud of him for that. We're going to try and double up this weekend at Shine 2017 over in Boston to hopefully kind of build that up and score 2 in a row, put ourselves back in front on the leaderboards. Because meanwhile, while we're placing 9th at DreamHack, right to follow Evo, Salem is placing first again. So he's first in the leaderboards from that, and we got to make sure to surpass him.
Yeah.
I'm confident.
Now, congratulations on that win, and I just want to change gears and talk about what's been your biggest accomplishment so far, something that you're the most proud of so far in your career.
My biggest accomplishment in my entire Smash career?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's relating to Zero. I think that my commentary I think it was SK Tar 2 was phenomenal. I think that was the highlight of my commentary. I think that's back when I was on top, when I was considered maybe to be the best commentator. Before the rise of the Black Plague, TK, Breezy, and the phenomenal EE are so talented, which is one of the reasons I felt comfortable stepping away from the scene. These guys have done a lot, but I was around before these guys started getting big and doing their thing, and kind of one of the pioneers and a little bit of the birth of commentary in Super Smash Bros., and I'm very proud of that. I'm super proud of all of the research and data I put into Super Smash Bros. Brawl when that game was a bit more prevalent, obviously. Now it's a retired game due to the fact that its successor now takes the spotlight. But I'm really, really proud of those things. I'm really proud of a lot of the victories that Zero and I have accomplished together. I don't know if one stands out over any of the others, but I'm really proud of that. I've done a lot of coaching work, and I'm really proud of that. Basically, I'm proud of like all of these things, the ties and the connections, making sure that tournaments run well behind the scenes. Some stuff I won't mention. But helping make sure that things are just running smoothly and pushing the industry forward. What I really want to be proud of, though, I've yet to accomplish, which is to help basically secure a better future for the path of the game going forward. That's something that I'm working on, and that's when I'll be really, really proud.
Now, what makes esports so exciting, or what makes fighting games so exciting right now?
What makes it exciting? Well, the best part about fighting games as an esport is that it is one of the easiest things to spectate. I tip my hat off to Street Fighter for this, because while a lot of Street Fighter players will say that right now Street Fighter V in its current version is not their favorite iteration of the game, it's definitely one of the most spectator-friendly games out there. And fighting games in general are really, really, really good at that. If you look at some of the mainstream esports that are extremely popular right now, it's a little bit hard to follow. Counter-Strike is a first-person shooter, which means that the game is mostly viewed at it from a single player's perspective. Now, this is not necessarily really hard to follow, because even though it's from only one player's perspective, you can tell it's a good thing when the player you're watching kills another player, and it's a bad thing when they die. So that's kind of straightforward. But you don't necessarily get the whole vision of everything that's happening in the match. League of Legends is terrible about this. While the game is an absolutely phenomenal game, one of my favorites to play, actually, it's really difficult to tell what's going on if you do not play League of Legends. If you're not familiar with MOBAs, multi-online battle arena type games, then you're just not going to be able to tell what's happening on the screen. If you don't know what the characters do and all these kinds of things, it's worthless to try and watch. If you sit down with your mom and you say, hey, watch a match of League of Legends with me, she's going to look at the screen and she's going to say, I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at. But fighting games are beautiful because the concept of two characters trying to hit each other and defeat each other is very easy for anyone to grasp. Even if you don't know what all the character moves are, even if you don't know what everybody does, it's so easy to watch, and it's really easy to get somebody into watching. You can teach it to, children and people who are completely unfamiliar. Kind of the reason why mainstream sports are popular. If someone who's never experienced the concept of basketball sits down to watch a game of basketball, you can explain to them pretty quickly, hey, look, there's a ball. There are these two teams of 5, and they're trying to shoot the ball in the hoop to score. And, they can't just run with the ball. They have to dribble it, et cetera, et cetera. But this is really easy to grasp. So you try and teach them soccer, American soccer, or football, as it's called elsewhere in the world. The goal of, you can't touch the ball with your hands. You have to kick it. You pass it to your teammates. You try and score it in the goal, the big net on the opposite side of the court. That's really easy to get. You can, watch this game and you can see it and you can understand what's happening. And you might not understand the intricacies of what makes somebody a great soccer player or what makes somebody a great basketball player, but you can understand this is why this team is winning. This is what they're doing to try and win. And fighting games are just like that. You can understand these guys are trying to punch each other or shoot each other with lasers or kick each other, whatever have you. And it's obviously good for this person and bad for this person when they connect those hits. So fighting games are very accessible and easy to watch. That's what makes them great. The thing that holds them back is simply that they're mostly on console. So accessibility to the game itself isn't as widespread and mainstream.
Yeah. Now, this is the part of the show I call the 5-question combo breaker, a.k.a. the button-mashing section of the show, a.k.a. the lightning round. So the first question is, what's the best advice someone has ever given you?
Best advice someone has ever given me. I don't know if this is absolutely the best, but it's definitely one of the top ones that comes to my head very often, which is one day, I think I might have been somewhere around the age of 15 or 16, my father taught me it costs nothing to say you're sorry. It's absolutely free to say you're sorry. And not burning bridges, repairing relationships, and just apologizing for stuff is just free. And it's a net positive most of the time. So it's like just winning for free.
Great advice. What do you think the esports industry needs, or the fighting game community in general needs, to continue to grow and be successful? You mentioned that you wanted to continue to develop the scene and improve it going forward. What do you think the industry needs, or the fighting game community needs, to continue to grow and be successful?
Okay, so Capcom has started to do this in a pretty decent way, but not as good as can be done. I think that the best way to start generating more interest in fighting games is to have a league. Right now, the vast majority of competitions for fighting games is done in an open tournament format. An open tournament is basically a format where anybody can sign up to play, and then anybody who signed up enters the bracket, and the vast majority of these tournaments are double elimination tournaments where there's a victor at the end. And I mean, that's great for a lot of tournaments, and I don't want to see open tournaments go away, but the fact that this is our primary form of competition, it makes it very difficult to follow the scene, because what you then have to be able to do is identify where you can find the broadcast of different open tournaments that are happening all over the place, and most of them are not connected to each other. Like I was just in Virginia for SmashCon, not this past weekend, but the one before, and now I'm going to Boston for Shine 2017. And neither of these events are related to each other. So you have to already be invested in the Smash scene to know that, okay, this is what happened last, and I know that SoCal Regional Saga in California was this past weekend. So if you're not already involved in the scene to already be having this information fed to you, it's so hard to keep up with Smash and where everybody's going and where they're playing and what they're playing for. Because there's no league, there's no structure to the competition. It's just X organization is hosting a tournament, $5,000 pot bonus, so all the top players will go there. But how do you know that if you're just a spectator watching the game? It's almost impossible to know, Organization X, Organization Y, Organization K, Organization W is holding a different tournament in Boston, in Kansas, in Colorado, and it's impossible to keep up. So if you look at my calendar, it's crazy. It just has scratches everywhere. Just these events are on this weekend, and sometimes there's 2 or 3. It's impossible to keep track of. There's no way to, it's not impossible to keep track of, but for an outsider who's not invested in it the way I am, being immersed in it, it's impossible to keep track of, and expecting people to do that is bad. And so while you can be invested in the results of a single tournament, to be invested in Smash over a long period of time, it's very difficult to do that. And because there's no storyline to follow. It's really difficult to build up characters and to build up storylines because there's no league for them to participate in, and there's not much of a development from one event to the next. It's just, oh, you did poorly at this event? Well, that's completely unrelated to everything else you're doing. Even though we have PGR seasons, they're arbitrary and they're not really based on anything besides time. So it's really good that, we have organizations like 2GG who have a circuit. But the circuit at this point makes up a very small percentage of, Smash competitions overall. And it would be much nicer if Instead, we had top players who regularly compete in a league that's not open tournaments, because that's the other thing. In an open tournament, you need to make sure that the broadcast is entertaining the whole time. But in an open tournament, it's going to be seeded, which means top players are all away from each other. And that means in the early rounds of the tournament, well, what are they doing? They're fighting, obviously, less experienced players, novices, amateurs. Sometimes people who don't even really compete in the game and just happen to enter a tournament because it was local to their region.
Sure.
Sometimes children who haven't even ever been in a competition before. And when you put a match like this on a live stream, it's extremely boring for people to watch and has no business being broadcast at an event the same caliber of where you're anticipating something like, a match like Leo versus Nairo or something like this. So when you have this, it really cheapens the value of your production. And unfortunately, that's all you have to offer when you're broadcasting an open tournament. That's what the early stages of the tournament are like. So you can circumvent or mitigate that problem by having show matches on the early stage of the tournament, but then you would need to have organizers that could figure out a way to monetize and make it profitable to actually get top players to agree to play stream show matches, which are not part of the actual tournament. But basically you're saying, well, the beginning of our tournament's too boring to actually broadcast, so we're going to put on these matches. You see what I'm saying? That's a big problem.
You're right.
So if you have a league or competitive series, like let's say you watch competitive League of Legends, right? There's no trash matches. You don't see like Team Solo Mid or Immortals or Envy or Cloud9 fighting like garbage amateur teams. Like, like that doesn't happen. You don't see them fighting random like, Kennedy High School from Louisiana or something like that. That would be nonsense. People would turn this off like, what's happening? Why is Bjergsen playing this 17-year-old who's never like been in a tournament? Like, that's the nonsense, right? Like, so you don't have that in other esports. And in fighting games, this is really prevalent. And, there's a storyline behind that. You can build this up. You can say, oh, look, these people met this many times in a league. And, you can follow stats in Smash. But, again, it's all scattered. So it's a lot easier when it's collected. And I think that's a big problem for the FGC and for Smash, the fusion of those communities that I really want to see them overcome. I think that if you look at the way it's done in other structures, a circuit, if you're not going to do a league, you can do a circuit, like it's done in tennis or chess. In chess, to become the chess champion, I don't know if you follow at all how chess works, but like to become the chess world champion, you have to win a tournament called the Candidates Tournament for the right to contest the World Championship in a title match. And then, like, to qualify for that Candidates Tournament, you have to play in several other tournaments and accumulate a high score over those other tournaments. And some of those tournaments, you can't even just enter them. You have to qualify to play in them in the first place in other qualifiers. So it's cool that you have open tournaments which anybody can play in. I get that, and that's cool. But open tournaments should serve the purpose of letting everybody compete and letting amateurs prove themselves as capable of being professionals, not just throwing professionals in with those. And then from there, you have closed tournaments or circuit or a league. Any of those formats is fine. Well, I mean, a circuit would be basically a series of closed tournaments. But from there, you can have it so that your professionals are consistently fighting other professionals, because these are the events that you can actually produce, that you can actually market properly. It makes it a lot easier to follow because you filter out a lot of the nonsense that nobody wants to watch, and you filter out a lot of the stress. You don't have to have venues packed with 1,000 people too. So it's cheaper. It's not even more expensive to run a circuit. It's cheaper to run a circuit because you don't have to accommodate 1,000 people or 500 people in a venue. Right. You can just put on a broadcast in a small, like the LCS studio isn't designed for 500 people to compete. The LCS studio is designed for 2 teams to compete at a time. And there's an amphitheater where a crowd can collect. But if you look at the way that professional broadcasts are put in, they don't need to be designed to accommodate 5,000 competitors. So or 500 competitors rather. It's a lot easier, cheaper, and better production if we have different types of tournament formats and different types of competitive formats for our players to compete in. And it allows us to do more interesting things too with the competitions themselves. But I digress.
What's the best play you've seen or the most memorable moment for you in esports?
In all of esports?
Yeah, all of esports, or if it's
I don't know.
memorable for particular fighting games.
We'll stick to Smash because, if I start trying to remember everything I've seen in every esport, it's just too much to think about. But because I follow a lot of esports, the game I play the most is Hearthstone. I play a lot of League of Legends. I follow that scene very closely, and I try and look at what all esports are doing because I want to keep abreast of the industry and what's doing it as a whole. But if I think about Smash, I think Zero's play on Mr. R at Evo 2015 or 2016. I'm pretty sure it was 2015, but I could be mistaken. Where he finishes the tournament by doing this. He's just playing amazing the whole time, and he finishes the tournament by getting an air dodge bait and uses a down air on Mr. R on the top platform of Battlefield, and then KOs him off the top with an up air. I mean, that was just ridiculous. It was nuts. I was going crazy. That's definitely one of the most memorable moments. Just because he ended the tournament on one of the hypest combos to ever happen. I mean, there's been more hyped combos and stuff like that, but just the timing, the placing of it was definitely a very climactic ending to a Zero who was playing on another level that set too. So I would say that's probably one of the most memorable moments. Yeah.
Share a valuable resource with the listeners that's something that's been beneficial to you in your career, such as a book, or did you use a lot of YouTube and like in your research of games and players and stuff like that? Share something that's been valuable to you in your career.
It changed at different times in my career, but something that's really valuable nowadays, something I use recently is probably, I would say, so I use this site, SSB World. That's really good for just seeing a collection of all tournament videos, as opposed to just trying to scout them out on YouTube and searching everything. Obviously, I use YouTube a lot. A lot of what I do is just study directly. I do study, psychology and elements of the mind because it's very important to be able to properly use that to communicate. Communication is so important, and being able to convey information correctly. It's not enough to know information. You have to be able to know the information and convey it in an effective manner. And that requires knowledge of how people interact and how they take in information. One of the things that makes me a good coach, to rewind to a question you asked earlier, is that it's not just that I have so much knowledge accumulated, it's that I also have the ability to convey this knowledge to my player in a way that he's going to be receptive of so that he can actually absorb that information. And I know how to avoid situations where I have unintended results on the psyche of my player. So that's really important. But a resource that I got this from, a lot of what I do is just super self-taught, just observational based. I don't know, like I'm a natural learner, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But a resource. I don't know. I'm a good resource. Where do I find my resources? though? That's hard. If I'm telling other people where to find their resources, you could check out like my YouTube channel or my Twitter. Like if you find me at Pier70, then I'm a great resource. Because people hit me up with questions all the time. But where do I go for my questions? I don't know. I come up with it myself through science.
What's one daily habit or something you do every single day that's been the biggest factor for you in your career?
Trying to make sure that I'm always pushing other people forward. I wouldn't say I'm ritualistic about things. There are some things I do, but not every single day. Like, I'll go on Twitter every morning, though. Not every single morning, but I'll put out a post and I'll say good morning winners, and then I'll give just my whole feed like a motivational blurb, or if I have a thought in my mind, I'll create a quick Twitter video about it. But I'm always trying to motivate people, push them forward, and bring positivity to their day. Because what that does is it keeps my aura very bright and positive, and it repels negativity from my life, so that my life is thus very positive, and it increases how effective I can be if my life is just full of positives. So by every single day sticking strong to the philosophy of pushing other people forward around me and being a very positive focal point for everybody else, it enhances my life in a very positive way. I'm a firm believer that there's enough space in this world for all of us, and you can grow more while still allowing other people to grow, and that we can all grow together. I believe that very tremendously, and I try and live that way every single day.
Awesome. Now, you mentioned the open tournaments and a lot of amateur players playing against pros and people who have maybe never played in a tournament before. We'll close out the show with you giving us your perspective on what it takes to, or give us your advice on someone who is just getting into, say, Smash, who wants to go pro. Let's say they're just getting in. They have a passion for it. They think they have they have some natural talent. What would be your advice for someone who wants to develop their skills and try and go professional at it?
Okay. So if you want to, the advice that I would give for going pro at Smash is the advice I would give towards anybody who wants to accomplish anything significant in their life. Obviously, there's tons of different advice I can give you, but if I have only one thing I can say to you, it's that you need to understand the importance of efficiency and optimization, especially when you're talking about competitive video games. But this can apply to any aspect of most people's lives. Optimization is the concept that there is a best way to do things, and that best way can be obtained by a logical conclusion that has a base in mathematics. So in Smash, for instance, the top players, the reason they win is not because they're necessarily the most creative players, I'll say, but the top players win because they optimize different situations the best. You need to make sure that you can figure out, is what I'm doing the best that I can be doing it? If it's not, how can I make it better? And ask that question about every single iteration of everything you do. Because if you're constantly asking yourself how you can make each little thing better, you're constantly optimizing what you do. And that is a necessary trait for being the best at something or doing something to the greatest capacity that you're capable of. If you're not asking that question, and if you're not constantly correcting your behavior, whether it be a play or a way you practice or a way you study, you're not going to reach the top. You also need to make sure that you understand how you learn and broaden your ability to learn different things. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people, they are limited in the capacity of how they're able to learn. This is what really separates top players from other players. Top players have the ability to learn in more efficient ways. Understanding how to learn something will enable you to learn more things and thusly grow faster and grow better. So understand how you learn and try and learn new ways to learn. Once you get that, you can become good at anything.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. Thank you so much. That was incredible advice for someone just starting out, and I even took away some tips on that, on efficiency and optimizing and continuing to learn and learn how to learn. I think is really an important life skill. Not just in gaming, but life in general, like you said.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, Spencer. It's been amazing. It's been a great time talking to you here.
Thank you. It's been great hearing your esports narrative and sharing with the listeners. And definitely, listeners of the podcast, definitely go follow Pierce and let the listeners know where they can interact with you online.
Okay, so you can check me out primarily on Twitter is where you're going to get most of the content from me. That's at Pierce7D, so that's like Pierce, the number 7, and then the letter D. And you can also check out my YouTube, which is the same, Pierce7D. Every once in a while, I'll throw up a video that I recorded on Twitter, and then I'll just move it over to YouTube if I felt like the information was valuable for a lot of people. This way it can be saved. A lot of my followers started requesting I do that, so I'm going to start putting up more and more content there, and eventually it'll start becoming cleaner, more professionalized content. You can check me out in those two places. Awesome. Thank you to Spencer for having me on the show. Thank you so much to basically all my fans and supporters out there. Thank you so much to Team Solo Mid for supporting me in my capacity to help out my homie Zero. Thanks to him as well. And again, thanks to you, Spencer, and the Esports Narrative for having me. It's been a great time.
Awesome, thank you. And I've been since I found you on Twitter, I've been checking out your videos, and I honestly have been getting a lot of value from your short 2-minute little walking rant videos, and I think they're very valuable. I think they're straight to the point, and you communicate in a way that's not sugarcoating anything, and you do communicate very well to a very good point, and I always enjoy watching those. So definitely keep producing those, because I, for one, am definitely getting a lot of value from those.
Thank you. I definitely am going to try and put out a lot more of those, actually. I really, really enjoy doing them. The only reason I don't do them is if I don't feel that the topic, if I don't feel I have a topic that's worth creating a video about.
Sure.
But if I do, I'm definitely going to create a video. So it's awesome. And I'm really glad to hear that you take a lot out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like you just have something on your mind, and whatever it is, it just comes across so pure that it's not something that you just made up something to talk about. It does seem like it's like something you've been thinking about for a while, and it's like, I got my 2 cents on this, and it ends up coming across very well, and I get a lot of value out of it. So.
Thank you. Well, thank you again, Spencer. Thank you so much for having me once again. It's been a great time.
Thank you. Thanks, Pierce. I appreciate it. And with that, I just want to remind everyone that if this all goes as planned, this show is just the beginning.
Thank you, listeners. I really appreciate you. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating on iTunes. I would love a 5-star, but if you think I deserve a 1, let me have it and tell me why. 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 And tell me why.